In the wake of the coronavirus and the recommended courses of action, we at Tiny Table Talks hope you are staying safe, healthy, and hydrated. If you are able to, adhering to social distancing and working from home is recommended. But if you do have to go out, ensure that you wash your hands and use a mask if possible. Now, on to the show. Hello, and welcome back to Tiny Table Talks. We're here every Thursday on Spotify and YouTube, so be sure to check us out. And please follow us on Instagram at the CC Zone. Last week, we talked about our lives in quarantine. Most of us have adjusted to this temporary change by working from home, but also by consuming lots and lots of art. Since International Art Day was yesterday, we decided that now is as good a time as ever to dedicate an episode to art. Given that we are taking measures to adhere to social distancing, I sent members of our team questions pertaining to this topic. Here they are now with some answers. My name is Ariana, and I spoke to 4 people.
I'm Laura.
Hi everybody, happy National Art Day, it's Chloé.
Hello, people of Earth and beyond. This is Ben Vandemark here for another Tiny Table Talks Quarantine podcast.
Hi guys, this is Maeva and I'm here since the very beginning of this podcast series.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word art?
For me, for sure, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about art is traditional art mediums. And when someone tells me that they've made art without elaborating, it's painting, drawing, sketching that comes to mind.
Many things, probably most painting, because this is what we teach at school, but also movies, book, every kind of art make me think of art.
It is a very unique, joyous, but more often than not infuriating term that everyone seems to be stuck with in their day-to-day lives. Some people devote their entire beings to art. A lot of people do everything they can sort of just to live a life apart from art. But to me, art, I suppose, is anything in your life, and I truly mean just about anything, that draws out a certain bit of excess meaning and feeling and just not joy, but purpose in your own thoughts, in your own existence. Something that just brings a new kind of little layer onto your own personality and the personality of the world around you.
When I hear the word art, the first thing that comes to mind is creation and expression. So for me, obviously there's the traditional things like paintings and drawings, but over the years it's expanded into more things in my opinion. So there's movies, fashion design, makeup, cooking to an extent, and actually most recently even a lot of storytelling and design in video games. It's really opened my eyes to that being art.
I'm sorry if I'm going to offend anyone of you guys and even the people who are listening to this podcast, but the very first word that comes to mind when I hear the word art would be boring. Because for the longest time, I would always think that going to the museum and just walking around, looking at some paintings was really boring to me. Because the thing is that I don't like reading. I don't know if you understand what I mean, but I don't like reading and I don't like even read those, those little signs next to the paintings. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but some paintings were visually appealing to me, but it was just boring to me. But as I grew up, I found out that there were different forms of art, such as performing art. Even music is a form of art. So I really like music. I always listen to music when I wake up, and then I just take a break from music when I'm working, and then I just go to some music when I'm done working and when I'm drawing, as I said in the previous podcast, because that was a hobby that I kind of lost in touch with. So now that we're all in quarantine, I just started drawing, and music really helps me to have a calm attitude, and I can just be relaxed and just draw.
What are different kinds of art forms that you appreciate in your life?
I personally, because I want to go into video game design, digital art is something that I've really spent a lot of time with: 3D modeling, animation, in general drawing digitally, and learning how to use this medium. And I've been really fortunate to have people in my life who are also interested in these things, who can help me and make art with me.
I really like music. I also really like performing arts, because some of my cousins actually they're still dancing. They're breakdancing, and sometimes they would just perform in front of people or in the street. So yeah, that was a really cool experience when I first saw my one of my cousin dancing. And yeah, I think dancing is a form of art where you can kind of express how you feel, but through your body, I would say. And I also like movies. I think movies is a form of art. Cinema is a form of art. Yeah, because you know how, I mean, to me, it's okay if you guys don't agree with me, but I feel like with the camera angles, with the music that they put, with like how the different people who are starring in the movie, they would just portray their feelings and emotions. Sometimes you can feel kind of sad or angry. To me, movies and cinema is a form of art, because sometimes I can feel the emotions in my heart, and I just end up crying, I would say, because I'm too overwhelmed with the emotions that I can feel when I'm watching a movie. And even yeah, when I'm listening to some music too, until this day, I'm kind of nostalgic and just reflect on some of my experiences in my life that made me sad, angry, and I can relate to some lyrics when I'm listening to some music.
I like to explore every kind of art, painting, movies, books. What I consume the most is probably collage, especially on social network as Instagram. And I also really like street art. Every time that I visit a new city, I always go to check the street art area. For the moment, I visited the Toronto's one. The best one is probably the one in London in the Shoreditch area. Every time I go, there is something new, and there's also all this mood with shops and events. And I would, if you can, you go to London, I recommend you to do some like free tour. It's very interesting, and you learn a lot about the artist and all the story behind this piece of art.
Film, beyond anything else, I'm a fully registered film buff. I don't know. I suppose a lot of the traditional forms of art, if you may call it, the sort of upper class forms of art, just paintings, sculptures, certain forms of photography. I don't get exposed to them very much in my own life, so I wouldn't say I appreciate them very much. So, I was a fan of just the classic Renaissance style art forms, very basic. I always loved landscapes. There's always been certain sculptures and abstract structures that have intrigued me very much so. Very Picasso-esque kind of things, because that at least allows you to draw in truly your own independent interpretation rather than, thinking, seeing this painting of, certain people in it, coming to your own conclusion about it, and then having some snob come up to you and say, well, actually, it is actually about genocide and the medieval serfdom that people suffered from at that time. And I was like, dude, I'm freaking serious. Yeah, you ever walk? If you're ever in a museum or just like a university or somewhere, and you just someone walks up to you and just starts talking that voice like hello, just walk away. You'll thank me. Been through that far too many times. And then of course I'm always a very big fan of music as well. I always appreciated the more earlier beginnings of music, orchestral style and symphony, but it's never been a huge fan of mine. I've been a big fan of pretty much music from the very beginning till almost the very end of the 20th century. And that covers all matter of sins, jazz, blues, rock and roll, early hip-hop, disco, tech, funk, all of it. I feel like it's part of one long, deep, integral story. And yeah, it tells so many different people's stories. In a lot of ways, just the story of people in that last century.
Are you more likely to make art, consume art, or do a combination of both? As an aspiring filmmaker, I feel that I do tend to do a combination of both. I definitely enjoy consuming art, especially at a time like this, because it makes life a lot easier. It helps me understand myself, and it also inspires me for when I do make my own art. And when I do make my own art, it feels very cathartic, and it helps me get a lot off my chest, whether that's through photography, filmmaking, or even just coming up with a story to make for later.
I, in the future, hope to make art that I enjoy sharing with others, and that is something that I'm proud of showing to more than one or two people who are close to me. But for the time being, I think I'm probably more likely to consume art instead of make it.
It's got to be a combination. There is no just doing one or the other. I mean, if you only consume art in your life, then you clearly make no interactions with the world as a whole, or with the world at all. I believe my definition of art may be a little bit more wide scale than a lot of average people, because people make little pieces of art every single day. Hell, a half-decent conversation can sometimes be designated as an art. Why do you think I'm doing a podcast right now? If you only make art, you never consume art or view art, then you're blind. And I'm not talking like physically blind, no offense to people who are actually blind. I'm talking like truly, truly blind. You do not take in anything from the world around you. Because there's little bits of art in the little things in your life every single day. Everyone takes in a combination of making art and observing art, because creating meaning is a day-to-day activity.
I would say I consume art more than I make art, because I'm not really patient sometimes when I'm drawing, and I get frustrated. The drawing that I have in mind, I can't draw it out. So I just get frustrated and I just keep erasing and just eventually give up, because sometimes I spend my whole afternoon to draw. And I think consuming art, yeah, I consume art a little bit every day, a little bit of art every day, I would say.
I'm most likely to consume art in everyday's life, reading books, watching movies, going to museum. I followed some art classes when I was younger, but the issue is that I'm not patient, and it's hard for me to get better in something because I give up a lot.
Has a piece of art ever made you emotional?
One of the songs that's always really touched me is The Diary of Horace Wimp by Electric Light Orchestra. That's in the rare set of bands that I would truly designate as artists beyond just musicians, because they're every single song that they put out it's rock and roll, but it's also just it's a journey, man. A journey through the stars and the escape of psychedelics, bro. A Diary of Horace Wimp, it was such a beautiful little story tucked away in a song, and it always reminded me of myself a little bit, just a screw up looking for love, and that's made me cry a couple times.
A piece of art I really like is the Magdalena Bay by Francois Biard. It's in Le Louvre. It's a blue painting representing Iceland. It expresses beauty and death at the same time, and it makes me feel sad because because of the depth, of course. But I'm also very amazed by the beauty of the painting and the colors. It's like an aurora boreal. Yeah, I hope it's the word.
For some reasons, most of the time I feel really emotional when I see some pictures, some photos taken in the past. The only example that I have in mind right now is that when I saw some pictures of the civil war that happened in Laos, the home country of my parents, because they had to move to France because of what was happening there. Yeah, the civil war happened, so they had to move to France. And that was really interesting to see how things were before and in their country, because they never really described it to me, because I think they don't want to share the difficult times that they had back then. So yeah, that was really interesting, and I felt really emotional to see the state of the country and especially their city when the civil war was happening.
For movies, there have been quite a few films that have moved me to tears. I remember one of the earliest ones being Edward Scissorhands, and even now, if I watch anything that has some crazy emotional undertones or makes me kind of realize something about myself, like it will move me. And I've also been in art museums and have seen a piece of art and it's moved me in some way. I don't like I won't cry at a piece of art, but if I see something that kind of moves me or makes me go whoa or rethink something, yeah, I believe that counts. Do you believe that having an emotional reaction to something, whether it's positive or negative, makes it art?
I believe that having an emotional reaction is part of something that makes it art. I think that regardless of what you create, human beings can't help but creating art. It's not something that you can turn on and off depending on how one or two people perceive it. It's just something that we do on instinct, naturally.
This is the definition of art they give into books or movies. Like, if it makes you feel something, it's art. But most of the time when I go to a museum and I'm looking at a piece of art, I'm like, okay, it's cool, but I never feel really connected with it. So no, I don't really think it's related. What makes me feel emotional is probably the piece of art representing our generation in a bad mood. There is, for instance, this painting when you see animals being the human and the human being the animals. It made me feel very bad. And it is to make you feel conscious about the behavior you are having with the animals.
I would say that if someone reacts emotionally to something, it means that the art is really good. I think that's the goal of art. One of the goal of art is to make people emotional. So if someone reacts emotionally, means that this art is good. Like it's excellent, I would say.
I do believe that because when you are looking at a piece of art or interacting with something that's considered art, it's an opportunity to learn about yourself, and it also might even influence the way you see the world. So it could change your perspective or even inform it. Though I do have to say, if something does have a negative impact on you, I think about it as, say, for example, I saw the Joker, was extremely moved by it. It definitely upset me and made me think about a lot of things in regards to society and how they handle things that they don't understand. But I'm never going to watch it again because it made me feel like absolute garbage. But I think things that are made with like the purest intention of invoking hatred or insulting other people, like anything that's purely made for hate purposes, I don't think that kind of qualifies, because that's just someone kind of knowingly spreading negativity. I think that's very different from maybe even seeing something that either makes you feel sad or you see and you're like, this is not good. I think this is garbage. So I think there is a fine line, but I do think most of the time when something does make you emotional and something does make you kind of look inwards to yourself or look outwards, then yeah, it moves you. It's art. What's an art form that you think is underrated? Why?
Honestly, feel like the graffiti hating days sort of ended in like I guess like the mid 2000s. I remember the good old days when my dad would be complaining about it when I was a little kid. And I would look on like the graffiti news stories on the news, and I'm just like, I kind of think those look cool. And lo and behold, I guess the world picked up my opinion. I was actually on one of my many quarantine walks, you know, just while everyone's shut down. Like I go on like little walks around the neighborhood. There's this school pretty close to where I live, this private school, and it's under construction right now. So there's all these big green wooden fences around the perimeter of the school, but something cool happened. I guess it would have had to have been one of the 10th grade or 11th grade classes for art. I guess got permission to go around and do these bits of graffiti art around like on these big green wooden walls. You know, makes sense. It's temporary. It's on the school property. What harm can come from it? Hey, let's do it. Get your spray paint cans, kids. But the thing that was unique about it was when people think of graffiti, they think of these like slurs, they think of destruction of property, they think of gang signs, and of course they think of those little weird S things that you learned how to do in 6th grade and you thought you were so cool because, hey, look at that, you can do this cool art form, yeah. But on these ones, they were all like positive messages. It was hope, optimism, freedom, friendship. They were all positive messages, and I'm pretty sure pretty much everyone in my community are really big fans of those bits of graffiti art.
The street art, probably. It have a huge success among young people, especially because of social network and everybody want to pose and do pictures of it. But with the old generation, it's, I think, still see as something opportunist and like some graffitis around the streets. Yeah, I think this is underrated.
I really like mediums that are pretty interesting, like people who draw with ashes or lipstick, or people who cut shapes with paper or use really chunky paints. I really like mediums that are kind of niche to the individual artist and seeing how people can use those mediums once discovered to create art that's really different.
Makeup. 100%. I know a lot of women who appreciate it and things like that, but I think overall as like a mainstream way of making art, it is not as regarded. Like I've seen many YouTube channels and I know many people who are so talented with makeup and they can completely transform their face. It's not just about kind of covering up flaws or enhancing good things that you have. It could totally be about delving into a whole kind of fantasy. And what's really sad though is that for a lot of the mainstream YouTube beauty channels, some of that artistry can be overshadowed by the drama in those communities. But if you do look around, there are people who are very passionate about the art of makeup, and it teaches you a lot. It's very transformative. It can help with confidence, but it can also help with creativity and expression. And I do think that it's not as appreciated as it should be.
An art form that people don't usually talk about is jewelry designing. Because even on the internet or even on TV, there's not a lot of information or not a lot of documentaries that are dealing with jewelry art. Because most of the time people are talking about movies, music, dancing, paintings. Yeah.
Who is your favorite artist or creative? Why?
Artist is Tristan Eaton. He's a street art artist. He's very influenced by the pop art. One of his most famous piece of art is probably the Audrey Hepburn in New York. You can easily recognize his work because it makes like black and white face with very colorful patterns. It's kind of a collage, so it makes street art and collage two things I really like. Another artist I really like is a London-based lighting designer. His name is Ronald Gomez. I got the opportunity to do my internship with him last year, and I learned a lot about design during this internship. He's a lighting designer, but he's using natural materials to do his creation, such as tree branches. So it's very nice the way he turns nature into pieces of light. I recommend you to go check his Instagram. It's called Seven Golds Lightning. When you see, it's very delicate, it's very nice, and the color, yeah, it's a great artist.
I think my favorite artist slash creative is Pony. So Pony is a makeup artist from South Korea, and she started off on YouTube just doing makeup videos, and one of her most popular video is when she put makeup on and she looked like Taylor Swift, I think. Don't remember who, but yeah, she tried to copy a celebrity makeup and she does really look like the celebrity. So I was really impressed. And then she's just, I don't know, I just like her because she's still down to earth, even though she released her own makeup products. And now she's well known in the makeup sector, I would say. Yeah, I like her because she's still humble and down to earth, even though she has her own company now.
I love a lot of musicians. The aforementioned Electric Light Orchestra has always been one of my favorites. Love a lot of directors. Love Martin Scorsese, Christopher Nolan, Taika Waititi. Artists, I don't know. Love Leonardo da Vinci. That's an easy answer. Beyond that, really couldn't tell you.
I have a lot of favorites. It kind of depends on the mood and the periods of my life. For a long time when I was younger, Tim Burton was it for me. He was the he was the artist that I just completely wanted to emulate. And even today, a lot of the people that I look up to are film directors. So yeah, there's still Tim Burton. There's Wes Anderson, Damien Chazelle, Quentin Tarantino. And then even for drawings, there's one guy that I really appreciate. He's a Japanese comic book artist. I think his name is Junji Ito, if I'm not mistaken. And he just makes these absolutely macabre horror mangas, and they're so good. And it's one of those things where from time to time I will go back to it and just read them and think about it because they're so bloody good, and it kind of shakes you. I think that's great. And then yeah, from time to time I find myself going to different people, different shows. I have a carousel of favorites. That's the only way I can really describe it in the most diplomatic way I can. Because I feel like if I do kind of say I have concrete favorites, that wouldn't be 100% true. It's all dependent on the time and the mood. With the advent of the internet, do you think it's easier or harder to make a living as any kind of artist?
I think that the internet has made it easier to become an artist just because there's a wider way to show people art that they might connect with. And I know I personally consume a lot of my art through the internet, seeing how other people have created theirs. And I know that a lot of people use the internet as a platform to offer commissions or create their own websites where they can display the art that they've made and show it to people who might connect with it.
It's easier to put your stuff out there, but because it's so easy to make your work so accessible, you do kind of have to fight against like the oversaturation of all kinds of artists just putting their stuff out there. So there is an element of having to stand out in the crowd more so than before, because before you would only be, I think, competing and trying to stand out in the community you lived in or the city you lived in. But now with things like YouTube or with social media, it's more of a worldwide stage. So you really have to kind of play the game, play with the algorithms, try to attract followers on top of making sure that you are giving and creating art that is very representative of who you are and your self-expression.
I would say it's always difficult to start something, even on the internet. Even YouTubers, sometimes they're not popular. Like most of them, it's really difficult for them to be popular. And for example, some music producers too, they are releasing their music videos on YouTube and or any other platforms like Spotify. But I just think in general, it's just hard, even though it's not on the internet. Even though you can reach more people, it doesn't mean you will necessarily be famous and stuff like that. You actually have to find an original idea and creative idea to kind of make a living on the internet. Because I feel like on the internet, people are more picky, or they're definitely more picky on the content that they want to see and want to watch or want to listen.
If you know how to manage social media, it's a great opportunity for you. I used to follow many collage accounts, and what they do is that they do collage, and after they have an online shop, and you can buy like phone case or t-shirt with their collage on it. It's a way to make money out of art. I don't know if they earn a lot, but I think for those who know how to manage social media is very good.
There are two ways to stand out in anything, art form or not an art form. Those two things are to either do something completely original or do the exact same thing as everyone else, but do it better. Those are the two ways to stand out in anything, art or not art. And the sheer problem is the more people you have making the same kinds of work, making at least similar types of art, the harder it is to do either of those things, because everyone's trying to do something new and original, and everyone's still kind of doing the same thing. And just generally speaking, saturation of any kind, of any setup, of any art form, makes any great artist more and more transparent. That's just the sheer fact. So, it's difficult. I definitely get it. I feel like a lot of people are... It's the sheer irony of the internet, where you have this bigger and stronger voice than you would have ever had, but more and more people are feeling like they don't have a voice to begin with.
Do you believe in the idea of high-class art versus low-class art? Do you enjoy one more than the other?
As I said, I really like street art, so I think it can be categorized as a low-class art. But I still like to go to museum and watch high-class art. I think no one is better than the other. Maybe the high-class art is way more complicated. It takes more time. When you see like the painting of Pablo Picasso or Leonardo da Vinci.
I don't believe in the idea of high-class art or low-class art. To me, I'm not the type of the person who will choose what to listen or what to watch or what to see just because, for example, oh, that's painting, that's for high-class art, for example. If a painting is nice to me, I'm just gonna like it. And I will enjoy seeing this painting, for example, or seeing other paintings of this artist, of the same artist.
I believe in the idea of high class versus low class, but I do not think it means anything than like a lot of upper class Bay Street pricks might try and tell you. It's very much in the same realm of like old money people, you know, the aristocratical kind of inherited wealth type people versus the new money kind of people, the people who built themselves up, the people who have been working out a small reputation for themselves bit by bit by bit. That's really what high-class art versus low-class art is to me. Low-class art is immature, new kind of art, like graffiti or hip-hop music or online caricatures or memes or something like that. But that's the whole thing. There's always a divide. There's always a debate. Is this art? Are memes art? Are kids' cartoons art? Are Pixar movies art? Yes, they are. God. I feel like the second it becomes almost an entirely big group consensus, this is art, that's when it becomes high-class art. And, you know, again, it happens to just about anything. I imagine at some point Leonardo da Vinci, and the Mona Lisa and so many other works of his were probably laughed at by a lot of people. And they said, oh, you dumb Renaissance artists, you guys are such a weird phase of Italy at this point in time. No one's going to care about you in 100 years or 200 years. No one cares. But look what happened. Now it's high-class art. Now people can't say shit about it negatively, and for good reason. It has stood the test of time. So, truly, high-class art is former low-class art that managed to survive the test of time.
I kind of understand it in that the notion of high-class art, obviously back then, people who were rich and people who had titles exclusively had access, time to, and opportunities to make and consume art. So stuff like getting a portrait done or going to the opera were all things that were previously excluded to poorer people. But now, because again, we have the internet and we also have like many different ways of making art, like say for example, going to the movies was never, initially it was like never super expensive to go to the movies. You'd pay like a nickel and then you were able to go and see a film, and that started uniting a lot of people. And then television came, and then again with different kinds of drawings and museums, everything kind of became open to everyone. So I think it all kind of merged. I get that to some degree because there's a lot of study in art history, so there's like a scholarly side. It does kind of elevate it to a quote unquote higher status. But I think in a few years, a lot of the things now that we are either casually consuming or even looked down upon will be studied in the same way because they'll become very representative of our artistic expression at that point in history. So I don't believe in it as much. But I do see where there's a difference. Like reality TV, it's definitely a lot easier to consume. Definitely a little more loose than going to see an opera. But I think they're all pretty valid. I think you can use some kinds of forms of art as a stimulus and other kinds as an escape. Or just like a thing to just relax to. I think all those are important. No matter what, it has a purpose. When art crosses over, such as when a comic book is adapted into a movie, are you inclined to explore both mediums or stick to the one you prefer?
I think changing from one medium to another, like a piece of writing or a comic book into a movie, is really hard to master right because the artist's initial intentions are often what people enjoy that art for. And so when a new person takes over it, that intention can get lost through the change of medium and through the change of creative direction. I don't think that it's impossible to have a bad adaptation of something, but I think in the past it's been rare to see.
Whichever one I see first, that is the one I stick to for the most part. And it's funny you brought up comic book being adapted into a movie. A big reason I think we have this question to begin with is because so many people, big nerds for instance, usually take the original work of any bit of art or any bit of writing or film and hold on to it like it is their young, loving child. Yeah, I have those like, that didn't happen in the comic type friends who like, you'll go see any sort of new movie with or any sort of new adaptation of a book, and they can tell you about 18 dozen things that was wrong about the movie because it didn't happen the same in the book before the freaking credits are over. I tend not to go to movies with those people. And honestly, I don't care, all right? I really, really don't care. Okay, if an adaptation works for an original medium, that's great. That's great. But you'll always have the original. You know that, right? If a new adaptation doesn't work out, you can just go back to the original and kind of pretend like the new adaptation doesn't exist, right? That doesn't break any rules. You're not going to be thrown into artist jail. You're not going to get ridiculed by the 4 other people on the planet who give a shit about this same thing. You know that, right?
I do not consume comic book, so I'm more likely to like the Marvel movies than the comic books. However, something that I'm more likely to do is like reading books. When books being adapted into movies, I usually prefer the books. Maybe because you create like this imaginary world, the characters and they have this face and they act this way, and when you see it into movie, change everything into your mind, so you get a bit upset.
For the most part, I am more inclined to stick to the ones that I prefer. If I see that something's adapted to a movie and it has an intriguing concept, then sometimes I will try to read the book, but more oftentimes than not, I will kind of stick to the way I've learned about it first. Though, actually, if there's a book that I really love and that gets adapted into a movie or a TV show, I will immediately go watch the movie. It's not often that it's the other way around.
Okay, as I said, I don't really like reading. So that's why I don't usually read comic books, even for Marvel movies. I just search it up on the internet and I just read quickly, but I will never read the comic because it's just me being lazy and I don't really enjoy reading in general, so that's why.
What's the last piece of art you've made?
Last fall, for one of my last classes in school, we had to create a new online business and design like a quick website and make a pitch about it. And we wound up doing this fashion lending website where it would be a lot like how you'd go and rent a tux for prom, except like people would go online and they'd sell. It's not important, but pretty much I turned to all my other group members saying like, oh, I'm pretty good at photography. I could do maybe like a photo shoot of some people I know, like they could model for me, and I could edit them and maybe work on the website too. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great, man. And I was like, cool. What else do you want me to do for the project? And they're like, no, just that's fine. So went all into it, did a photo shoot in just some areas around my campus for over one very long, crazy day. Taught me a lot about just how to work with your model, get the best kind of poses out of them, what kind of angles are done best. I even learned a little bit about like the makeup styling of it because I got one of my good friends to come and like do the makeup styling for it. She did amazing. She had like specific makeup just for like black and white photography. So thank you, Jane, if you're listening. You are the best. You got to teach me some of that crazy eyeliner tricks. Not that I use eyeliner. What are you talking about?
So I did some collage that I posted on my Instagram account. You should go check it. It's my name is Avananas. It's very time consuming. I didn't expect that to take that much time. But it's really cool and I would like to do more, especially now that we are in quarantine. But I did not have my iPad. And this is what I'm using to do them. So I think I'm gonna buy a new iPad.
It was actually last night. I drew Olaf from Frozen because I was bored. So I would say that's my last piece of art that I made.
Do you consider yourself to be a creative person?
I would like to consider myself a creative person, but it's a little bit hard because I think with everyone who is creative, there are on and off stretches where they can feel good making art and then not feel good making art or not even able to produce art. And I think being creative is all about learning how to manage those points where you can't make what you want to make. And I haven't reached a point where I can really push myself through those spots where I'm like, I really just don't want to create anything right now. And I think something I admire in people who are artists is they seem to have this desire to continuously produce, and it's their way of communicating what they're thinking.
Yes, I'm creative because, for example, for some ideas for social media, I have to come up with some creative ideas and funny ideas that people will find it interesting to see on social media, but also even with the way that do things, I do things sometimes, and people are kind of confused and they like, oh, Maeva, why are you doing that this way? That's not the usual way. But I don't take it negatively. I just think that I have my own creative way to do stuff.
I think I used to be more creative, especially because in school, secondary, we had a lot of essay to do. They give us like one subject and we can write whatever we want. So when I start writing, you can stop me. Like the teacher will ask like for 1 page, and I will write like 10, because I'm creating this story into my head, and it becomes bigger and bigger. But now that no one is telling me to sit down and write something that is mandatory, I never take time to sit and write. And I think it could be cool to do it.
I do, but then I see like the 10 other like super creative friends that I have who are like 10 times better at their craft than I could ever imagine being. So I say I'm like a diet creative person, you know. I've got a few less artistic calories in me.
I definitely do. Sometimes I have to, because a lot of my ideas just come from emotional places. So sometimes it's a big battle between just using the emotions as inspiration and drowning in my emotions. So I do like that I have something to channel those emotions through. How do you think art as a whole will be affected once quarantine is over?
I've seen lots of interesting art about the quarantine, but I think as a whole, something that is so profound into who we are as people, I think it's way bigger than this quarantine. And while new art will appear through the quarantine, I think the only thing that could possibly be switched or altered is the frequency of people entering movies or appearing in large crowds to view these things. But things like museum, other like ways of consuming it, I'm not 100% sure that they will change anything.
Art will be fine. Art is one of those wondrous things that I think will survive no matter what humanity throws at itself. We could nuke ourselves 50,000 times over. I imagine someone will be doing really cool mushroom cloud gifts a month afterwards. And I feel like we're going to get some interesting new stylings out of this, because great work, artistic and non-artistic, always comes out of hardship. We're in a tough time right now, but the toughest points in life are where you learn the greatest lessons, so I think people are going to come out of this stronger, at least in an artistic form. But hell, I like to think that maybe we'll come out of it in a stronger form altogether, all around as well.
Oh, for sure. Like, for example, for performing arts, the government won't be allowing people to go see, for example, an artist in a crowded place with a lot of people around them. And also for the museums, for example, the Royal Ontario Museum, because there's a lot of tourists going there and a lot of people in general. So I think there will be some regulations like, oh, a limited number of people who are allowed to go there, I would say. But I think overall, during this, when this quarantine time will be over, I think we just have to stay home and look look at art, because I think that it won't be easy for the government, for example, to kind of make art as it was before the virus appeared, I think. So yeah.
I think because we've all kind of had different experiences in quarantine, there'll be different things that are created in different mediums to express those experiences, whether they were relaxing experiences or experiences of struggle. And just overall, I think there's going to be a boom in art because everyone's kind of realized that in these times, art is what we've turned to kind of help us cope with the situation. So I'm hoping that as a result, there will be a little bit more appreciation, a little bit more funding for a lot of things. And because everything's on pause, I feel like there's going to be just like a big boom in production. Because suddenly all these things that were kind of on different schedules are suddenly all kind of neck and neck now. So I think Toronto will be booming after this.
I don't know about painting or drawing, but I think many books will come out, especially journal, because I saw many people on social media starting to write about their experience of quarantine, even doing like daily diary. So I think what's gonna come out is a lot of books.
This wraps up our episode on International Art Day. I hope that you were all able to find a piece of art that you appreciate, or even make a piece of art in order to celebrate that. And I'm just grateful for the fact that we do have art in these times of quarantine, whether we're doing our part by staying home, we have it to help pass the time, and whether we're essential workers or first responders, it's hopefully something that is used for when they do have time to unwind during these times. We'll be back at our respective tables next Thursday discussing food. Follow us on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube at the TC Zone, and tune in next week, and don't forget to bring your appetites.
Thank you so much for listening. Have yourself a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.